Hey, so today's Tuesday, June 4th. I'm actually just shooting a little introduction here. I am still getting used to technology and YouTube and all that stuff. So I just did this really, it was, really long vlog. It was 16 minutes and some change. And when I tried to upload it, they said that it was too long. But there was a lot that I wanted to preserve that I had already said. So I'm still working some things out, and I got iMovie on my computer that allows you to do like video editing and stuff. So I'm gonna try and work it out. I'm gonna take this little clip and add it on. So you're gonna probably see a little break real quick, and then the second half of the video that I just recorded is gonna come up. So that's just what that is. My roommate's really good with this, and so when I get a chance to hook up with her, I'll be able to do things more smoothly. But this is just an introduction. This is I had to cut off the first half of the video and re-record it. I'm going to have to end up doing 2 blocks. So anyway, here is day 1 of praying for peace. Begin to tell my story, and I decided to go kind of chapter by chapter, do a chapter a day, maybe a chapter over 2 days, depending on how detailed it is. I don't want to, give everything away, but just give people an idea of what I've been through, why I have the mindset that I do, and hopefully can share some things with people through my own experiences and prevent them from dealing with some of the things that I dealt with. So this is my book. It is called Praying for Peace, A Journey to Serenity. And we'll get to that picture there in chapter 6. That's a car accident that got a whole chapter in the book because it was a huge life changer. But starting with chapter 1, basically covers the first 10 years of my life and just kind of lays the groundwork for everything. It's not nearly as detailed as some of the later chapters because of the time span that it covers. But so in the first 10 years of my life, I guess one of the most familiar feelings, one of the most definite memories I have of childhood is being different. In every way that somebody could be different. I never felt like everybody else. So, for starters, I was gifted, and I tested off the charts. We used to take I think it's called New Jersey Ask now in New Jersey, but standardized test. So we used to take the Iowa test, which would match us up against kids in our district and then kids in our grade across the country, and I scored in the 90th percentile every single year or above, and that was on the low end. There were years where I scored in the 95th and 96th percentile, and this was just natural intellect, and then my mother supplemented it. She ordered all kinds of books, and I read a lot as a kid, and it was good because I was lonely, so, that gave me something to do. But so I felt different for that reason. I was also, a tomboy. I was going to go through some pictures and try and show some pictures, but, just take my word for it. I had a haircut. The joke of the day in high school, in elementary school, was the bush. They used to call me the bush because I had like this afro puff. My hair is really curly, and when it's out, it afros. And I wanted my hair short because I was a little tomboy, and my father made me look like he gave me a little shag haircut and everything. And I didn't fit in. I have a brother that's 10 years older than me, that I was just too small to hang out with him, and I have 2 younger sisters, each 2 years behind me, that were regular feminine girls that wanted to push baby carriages and play play with dollhouses and stuff. I wanted to play basketball. I wanted to do karate. So that was a major issue for me, was feeling different. The biggest issue that I had really growing up was my relationship with my father. I wrote 3 versions of my book before I published it, and the first version, it wasn't inaccurate at all, but I really hammered him, and I really came after him and tried to expose all these things that he did, and a lot of them have remained because they're true, and they happened and they're real, but I realized that there were certain areas that I was trying to crucify him, and when I got further down the road, I learned about forgiveness, which I've talked about already a little bit. So it was really weird with me and my dad. First of all, there was a lot of turmoil in my household. Chapter 3 talks a great deal about the relationship that my parents had before I even came along. And I'll get into that a little bit later down the road. But my father was nothing short of psychotic, and somehow hit it well enough to function and be a public servant, as a school teacher for 30 years. But he was a tyrant at home. So I have an older sister named Juno that is not my mother's daughter, that actually has a better relationship with my mother than my father, that I didn't even know about until I was 14. Did not know she existed, which I don't understand, but that's neither here nor there. Then I had a brother 10 years older. I have a brother 10 years older than me. Then there's that gap, then there's me, then there's my two sisters. And so my brother and my father were constantly fighting. By the time I was 6, 7 years old, my brother was either running away or getting kicked out. My father and my mother were always arguing. My father was always screaming at the top of his lungs. He put his hands on my mother a number of times, and we overheard it. My father had a lot of control issues. He still, to this day, has a lot of control issues that I've now learned about, and I understand what caused them. It doesn't change the fact that he spent his life miserable and made a lot of people miserable in the process. So I was dealing with that. So one of the, I had two major identity issues. One, obviously, was that I was a tomboy. I didn't feel like everybody else. I wasn't like the girls, and I wasn't really like the guys either. And the other issue, which I think was absolutely manifested by my father, was my racial identity issues. This is a picture of some of my family. That's my dad, my mom, and my sister on my graduation. So we're all fair-skinned, but I think that they look African American. I don't think that I do. But the interesting thing is that I don't have any Caucasian family members. I don't have one person in my family that is white that I could point to that say that there's this mix. It's just my mother's Creole, born on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, and she's black, Spanish, Italian, Irish, German, French, Native American, and even a little Chinese. And so there's this whole big mix. My entire family in Mississippi is what they call a red bone, light skin. I feel like I look white. Anyway, it didn't really matter. I grew up in a town that in 1997 there was a magazine called Interrace Magazine that ranked Montclair as the #1 town in America to raise an interracial family. It is very diverse, very liberal, very progressive, and race really should not have been an issue, but here comes my father, who has his own racial issues. So my father was a black history teacher. He was a Q, which is a black fraternity, Omega Psi Phi, and he preached constantly. If you have one drop of black blood, you are black. If someone asks you what you are to respond black. Not mixed, not, he had this chip on his shoulder. We all had t-shirts and jackets. My dad's a Q, my husband's a Q. It was to be known that we were black. And so now I had to, reconcile this with the fact that I'm looking in the mirror at me and I know that I'm not all black. And then my father's got this disdain for white people. So we couldn't cheer for the Celtics. We couldn't cheer for Notre Dame. Couldn't even cheer for the Yankees. He deemed the Yankees to be a white organization. Couldn't watch the Brady Bunch. It's stuff that how was this guy a public educator for 30 years, But anyway, so those created a lot of issues for me that I started to deal with, and that I had to deal with, and I wasn't really dealing with them. I didn't know really what to do. I wasn't raised in a faithful household either. My father doesn't believe in God. My mother was a Catholic, but kind of put her faith to the side to appease him. So I wasn't raised in a faithful household, but somehow I ran across this song when I was a kid. It's by the Winans. It's called A Friend, and I used to listen to this song on repeat. Sometimes I wonder if that's kind of where my compulsive nature came from, is that, being lonely and having all this pain and not having any outlets, and finding outlets in compulsive things, throwing a tennis ball off a wall for hours in my backyard, shooting pool for hours, playing basketball for hours, listening to the same songs for hours. And it gave me comfort to believe in it. I didn't have a relationship, but to believe in this God that was there, that was always there, that was going to be there when nobody else, was. When I was lonely, even though you can't see him and you may not even feel him, that God is there. And although I didn't believe it, the message was important, because I was 8, 9, 10 years old and completely lost, living in a house full of turmoil, in a world full of turmoil. My life was turbulent. And there was one more major issue that I had to deal with when I was young. And although I was a little bit too young to remember the majority of it, I remember enough to have had it affect me. These are my cousins. Seated is my Aunt Jackie, that's my mother's sister, and standing are six of her 7 kids, all grown now. So in the middle here is Teresa, and Teresa had a twin sister named Terry. So while all of them lost a sibling, I imagine that it was a little more devastating for Teresa because this was her twin. They were at a party, and Terry's boss had this crush on her. It was really weird. He was older. His son was her age, and sent the son to the party, and some kind of argument ensued between them, and he shot and killed her. And this was around the corner from my cousin's house. So my cousin Cindy, who was the youngest, was at home with her older brother, heard the shots. Like, she was murdered right in front of the house, and the oldest brother, John, heard the shots and went outside and basically held his sister in his arms while she died. 20 years old. And it happened, I don't remember the exact date. It was either August 6th or August 10th, but either way, it was around my 6th birthday, which is August 8th. And I just remember the misery and the grief and the despair. And the kids weren't allowed to go to the funeral, so I didn't get to say goodbye to my cousin. And although I didn't have much of a relationship with her, I was 5 going on 6, I remember her. And I'm very close to that specific. I'm close to a lot of my cousins, but those cousins grew up in the same town as me. Like, they were more like, even not when I was a kid. My father kept us away, which is another part of the story. But as I got older, like now, the youngest one, Cindy, is my best friend in the world. I have her name tattooed on my ankle. She's my biggest confidant. She's kind of like everything to me. But my father kept us from them. So I didn't know enough about her, but it saddens me to know the relationship that I have with them now as an adult, and that I never got the opportunity to have that with her. So anyway, that's a pretty basic summary of the first 10 years of my life. If you want to know more about the book, it's on Amazon. And I guess the moral of that, because there's not really much good to the first 10 years, it was rough, was that even though I did not know God was there, I didn't have a relationship with God, I didn't even know that I believed in God, that He was there, that in that loneliness there was a comfort. Whether it was listening to a song over and over again, or throwing a tennis ball off a wall for hours, or shooting basketball, or practicing karate, or whatever it was, I found a release, I found some comfort in an activity that God placed love in my heart for. So, God works in a number of different ways. Some are mysterious, and some are actually very obvious. And the moral of that story is that I didn't have to be praying, I didn't really have to be believing. The love of God was in my life in ways that I didn't even understand until much, much later in my life. And see, now as an adult, one thing, I go through these periods of time where sometimes I swear I feel like I'm getting punched in the face with all these signs. It's, they're glaring. And then there's other times where I am like yearning to hear God or for God to direct me, and I don't hear anything, I don't see anything. I saw something on Facebook once that said, just when you feel like you can't, when you can't hear God or you can't find Him, just remember that the teacher is always quiet during a test. And not that I believe that God tests you, but there are periods of time where you do have to stand on your own 2 feet a little bit, and He is there, like that. I'll close with this. Although my family was not particularly religious, especially my father, there were 2 posters hanging in my kitchen when I was a kid that I always took to heart. And one was the Serenity Prayer, and on my vision board, when I show you, there's actually 2 copies of the Serenity Prayer. I carry my AA coin in my pocket, which has the Serenity Prayer on it, and Serenity Prayer was huge to me. The other was Footprints, and if you've never heard that poem, it basically is somebody walking along the beach with God, having a conversation, and looking back and realizing that in the darkest periods of their life, there was only one set of footprints, and feeling like, damn, God, every time, I needed you, where were you? There's only one set of footsteps, and he's all mad, and he's lamenting, and that's when God says, no, my child, I never left you, that was when I was carrying you. Those were my footsteps, not yours. So the moral of all of that is that even when you can't feel it, even when you feel like God has walked away from you or disappeared, you are not to understand God's methods. It's the nature of God is beyond all of us. It's not for us to understand. That's what faith is. That's what trust is. And you don't have to have faith to survive, because I didn't. It makes living a lot easier to have faith, though. So, I hope you can get something from that. Have a good day.